Okay, I want to welcome everyone and thank all of you for joining us this afternoon for our August WISAC monthly meeting titled Civic Curiosity and the Impacts of a Digital Political Landscape. I am Lisa Lewis, Administrative Manager at the Whitburn Center. Please note that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Whitburn Center's website and YouTube channel. Events for the 2025 to 2026 year focused on our partnership with the Wisconsin Alliance for Civic Trust, or WISAC, who hosted monthly network meetings on Wednesdays. Going forward, the Whitburn Wednesday event series and WISAC monthly meetings will be returning as separate meetings. The Wisconsin Alliance for Civic Trust is a cross-partisan network of Wisconsin residents that promotes values fundamental to our democratic republic, including support for fair, safe, and secure elections and support for peaceful engagement. The WISAC monthly meetings will be the last Wednesday of each month at noon Central Time. And now I'll turn things over to Professor Michael Ford, who will get us started.
All right. I'll admit, I didn't know I was getting us started, so I'm very excited now to get us going here. So let me hang on one second. I suppose first thing we can do is introduce all of members of our CRT team if people want to introduce themselves. I guess, Ruby, you want to get us going?
Yeah, sure, of course. So, hi guys, my name is Ruby Hoffman. I'm a recent graduate of UWO. I graduated this past December. I've been working with WISACT since this past October, so it's almost been a year, which is kind of crazy to think about. Um, but it has been a really nice experience for me post-grad, getting to work with, professors that I typically wouldn't be working with, but now that they've become some of my very wonderful colleagues and friends.
Thanks, Ruby. Let's go to Gabe Murray next. Actually, is Gabe here?
He should be here. I
He
know
should be
he's
here.
he's coming in from work is what he told me, so he might be a little late.
Okay.
But
Well, then we won't make him introduce himself because he cannot. But Gabe is an MPA student. I believe he currently works in the Evers administration.
Mhm.
Good guy. Lauri Asbury.
Hey, I'm Lauri Asbury, and had been fortunate enough to be with WISAC since let's see, 2024, 25 range, when it was first started. And I learned a great deal and really value the importance of the message of a strong democracy and civil and civic discourse. Currently, I'm a school board member, and I also participate on the Wisconsin Association of School Boards board as well. So, thank you for having me. I'm excited for this. And I
Thank you
really
very much.
appreciate Ruby and Mike.
Aw.
Oh, it's all Ruby, trust me. Ben Gruber.
Yeah, Ben Gruber. I'm from the southwest part of Wisconsin. Been peripherally engaged with WISACT for a long time, in big supporter of the mission. And currently, I'm a state legislative candidate for the state assembly and just proud to be part of WISACT and support the mission however and whenever I can.
Excellent. And then my name is Mike Ford. I am a professor of public administration here at UWO. Also a director of the Whitburn Center, but probably most relevant to my membership here on the Public Voices team, which is what we are, is I am an elected official on the Oshkosh Area School District Board. So the Public Voices team is the team that is really charged with having a plan to put out public statements when something occurs that's relevant to WIS Most recently, we've been working on an op-ed that we're going to get out there before the fall elections. And then we're always just in communication, thanks to some of the work Ruby did, having a plan, kind of a flow chart about when we make public statements and how we make public statements. But today we're here to talk a little bit about, I believe, kind of digital civic engagement. So Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're here to talk today about civic curiosity and the impacts of a digital political landscape, which is a topic that the Public Voices Action Team for WISAC came up with. And just in case we have people that are new to WISACT or don't remember acronyms that we're using and such. Mike mentioned CRT earlier. That stands for Community Resilience Team. And in essence, we just implemented this back in March officially. And it's essentially an advisory and action board for WISACT so that we can strengthen the foundation of our work to extend it beyond the small number of staff that we have working on this project part-time at UW Oshkosh. So we have people from various parts of the state that are engaged in and interested in this kind of work that are helping us, make plans. And recently we decided that our 4 action teams should, I think a very concrete thing that they can do is to lead these monthly WISAC meetings, choose the topic, help make them happen, recruit panelists or guest speakers and the like. And our 4 action teams are healing and repair for when there's conflict. What do we do about that? Outreach and stories, getting more people into the WISACT network. We partner with the Carter Center, which refers to our group and the 5 others that are working directly with the Carter Center as Democracy Resilience Networks. And then telling stories about the people that are doing the kind of work that aligns with what we're up to. So more people recognize that, hey, we're capable of having cross-partisan dialogue and doing things together. Third group is civic trust and election integrity. I do have these memorized. And then the 4th is the Public Voices team that's leading this effort today, which we're really happy about. So without further ado, I want to get into it, but I do want to just quickly acknowledge something. Since the last time we met, a lot of things have happened in the world, and one of them was a tornado ripping through our area here in the Fox Valley that has had a direct impact on people in the room, so to speak, today. So that was a very tragic event that people are still recovering from, and I think it's just important to acknowledge that. Similarly, I'm throwing a curveball to the panel. We had Dolly Parton pass away yesterday, and it's been argued that Dolly Parton is one of the only things Americans can agree on. So I want to start with a simultaneously sad and light note because I didn't meet her personally, but it sounds like she was a person that radiated light, and many people are sad about losing her today. So what's that have to do with us? Well, let me tell you, through the form of a question. So I want to ask the panelists and just invite participants too, to share any questions you have, things you want to discuss in the chat. I have a set of questions that came from people submitting them ahead of time, but we can always take questions, live questions too. So the first Dolly-related question is, how does Dolly's legacy intersect with the goals of WISACT as you see it? Whoever wants to
Okay,
go
I'm
first,
gonna
jump
I'm gonna
in.
kick this one off.
Go for it, Ruby.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. So I saw a video yesterday on the BBC talking about how with Dolly's passing, there has been a lot of bipartisan sympathy towards her passing, and a lot of politicians from, you know, President Trump to former President Obama to other people, whether it's local, state, things like that, have been pouring out waves of sympathy, just sharing their love for Dolly Parton. And it's actually, it's very, like, I know it's super sad that she passed, but it's like kind of refreshing to see bipartisanship when it comes to an entertainer like that. Like, I knew that she had, a lot of pull with, all the people, but it's great to see that everyone can just take a moment and be like, this is, a lot for, the United States, for pop culture, things like that, and just everyone coming together.
I like it, Ruby.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh no, I knew this was going to happen to me. Now you're going to get a long, rambling answer. No, one of my, I have a bunch of songs. As some of you know here, I like to play music a lot. I have songs that are my guilty pleasure songs. They tend to be songs that are usually written by a female and sung by a female in a voice I can't possibly do. So one of the Dolly Parton songs that I always liked to sing was Coat of Many Colors, which you probably heard, which is pretty cool. But when she passed away, and when this came up, Paul had given me a heads up earlier today that he was going to ask about her. I started thinking about that song and how that parallels a little bit about the American experience. If you don't know that song, she's singing about how she grew up poor, kind of a mess in her household, and her mom made this coat for her out of just patches and things she found around the house, and she loved the coat. Didn't understand why the kids at school made fun of her for wearing these rags, but this patchwork came together and it was something worth celebrating, and that's something to her. That just got me thinking about the whole American experience and what we're interested in here at WISAC, that we have such an unwieldy country built on contradictions. Here in Wisconsin, we have such an unwieldy politics, contradictions everywhere. Yet groups like us, WISAC, we're trying to be forward looking and say that, hey, we can still make something that's not only functional, that works, even if it's a little unwieldy and maybe doesn't look perfect or look like all of us want it to look as individuals, but we can still make something. And at the end of the day, that's actually pretty dang beautiful that we can put something together out of all these unwieldy, contradictory pieces. So she was able to put that together in a song. And yeah, that's where my mind went when you asked that question, Paul.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. There's a follow-up here. So other panelists, you can take the first question or the part B there. What advice might Dolly have for us as the political tension mounts during a momentous midterm election season here in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think for me, her ability to be wildly successful, famous across boundaries, yet to still remain just laser focused on showing up locally in communities and doing the really impactful work is a lesson that across boundaries, I hope everybody walks away with. And I think that might also be her advice is show up locally, do the work, and impact where you can.
I would like to start with your first question because it's kind of part of something I wanted to mention as we get later into the questions. Dolly had universal appeal almost, and there are very few things now in our very kind of segmented society where she could reach across lines from age, music genre, location, political ideology. And she was an authentic and caring person. And I think if we can come back to, I also heard that someone said that she was the last person that all Americans could agree on that they liked. And I would like to hope that there are others that maybe, including groups like WISACT, where we can go back to where there's a universal appeal. And then her advice would probably be to be your authentic self and to give and do from your heart. Be a good listener, be supportive, and give of yourself. Um, she, I mean, yes, the fame was the important thing in some aspects of the life once she was more to be successful than it was to be famous. And she did so many things that I didn't realize until I started hearing about all these things. And so, a person that she would probably recommend that all of us be looking at the world with gratitude and what can I do to help others?
Excellent. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit and get into some of the questions that were submitted for our discussion today. This is kind of a broad one to get us started on this topic, but for you panelists, what's your favorite way to consume news? Where do you tend to get it? And others, again, feel free, other participants, just put something in the chat for any of these questions.
I get my news pretty much entirely from YouTube. There's this news show that I watch every day called Breaking Points. It's a commentary YouTube channel that I primarily get my news from on a daily basis.
Thanks, Gabe. And Gabe is one of our panelists who's just a little bit late getting here, MPA student here at UW Oshkosh from the Madison area. Thanks, Gabe.
I like to still get online to AP News and BBC and read. Life has me doing less of that just through time restrictions. So I have gotten more and more from long form podcasts. YouTube, I like YouTube, but the clickbait headlines feed that algorithm. And by switching to long form podcasts, I found I can avoid a little bit of the cuts and get some long form news.
I do like a good podcast when I like to do it. I actually like to listen to the podcast while I'm working on this, like WSAC stuff or other stuff. So then I can, you know, I guess get my political fill for the day in a way. And I guess this will probably be a segment that we'll talk about a little later, but my friends and I also will send each other, TikToks, reels, whatever, of other political things that we all stumble upon, and then it causes, us to have a conversation. So that's actually really nice to know that I have, a community that I can talk to about politics in a very safe environment. But in short, podcasts all the way.
I think it's really interesting to look at the way people receive their news and compare it to their age, because there's such a huge variety of places where you can go. I'm kind of old school and I haven't quite gotten totally new school, but I'm trying to be flexible. So I like watching the morning TV news, which I know is probably really dumb, but I do like to have it on, and just even if it's in the background for local stuff. And then I'm with you on AP. I also look up Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. Sometimes opinion pieces are interesting to see, but a lot of this requires time. So when I'm in the car too, I like to listen to WPR or some local thing like that. I haven't quite gotten into the podcast world yet, although I'm trying. Um, so in terms of that, I haven't explored that as much as I would like to. But I also enjoy hearing from others, and also I was just trying to look up my little group of things where I get most of my news. I also like the Atlantic, I'm not gonna lie. Um, and I like to watch the News Hour on PBS, and also the political shows that happen on Fridays, I think are really interesting. But it's hard to get, I feel like I have to go to a lot of sources, Al Jazeera, BBC, to get a really good idea of kind of a combination from different viewpoints.
Quick interjection, Lauri, and this is a tie to Dolly, based on what Ben said. I don't think it's silly that you're watching the local news. I mean, when most Americans still say their most trusted source is local news. But I think that's a really good point you ended there with that. Man, it takes some effort to try to to put it all together in a picture that seems comprehensive. I think you're going to say something, Mike.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I think I'm probably kind of like you, Lori. I'm a little boring there. Like I read my. Not that you're boring. I'm boring.
Hey,
I almost reflexively I wake up. It's like CNN.com. Let's see if anything exciting happened. I think I even subscribed to it because that's how much yeah, whatever. I'm into it. Just Wolf Blitzer. He gets me. Then the Milwaukee paper, jsonline.com. I really like that. I'm in the habit, being local guy, I have to read the Oshkosh Northwestern. Though my joke with my family is I want to know what happened in Appleton last week, so I got to go check out the Oshkosh Northwestern, which is not nice, it's not fair. But that's just the nature of local media these days. I do go on Twitter a lot too, and that's more for, I don't know, that's probably just a bad habit because I just kind of like to know what people are talking about. And oftentimes they're talking about things that are half truths and factually inaccurate, but I figure it's better to know what's being discussed than not. being discussed. I'm fascinated by the YouTube that Gabe mentioned. I've never considered that to be a news source. Like that's where I go to watch fly fishing videos. Um, Maybe that's because my algorithm's all screwed up. And that's the only thing I see on there. But that is very interesting.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We started touching on this a little bit, but the next question is, in this modern day and age of social media politics, what is one pro and one con about this, in your opinion? And then there's a couple follow-ups that you'll see in the chat. So jump in, whoever feels like taking that one.
Yeah.
Only one pro and one con.
I'll
Just
start
one,
with
just one.
oh, I can start with a pro and then I'll shut up since I was just talking about Twitter. I do think one of the pros is that it's instant. You can get an idea like right when something's breaking to find out what's happening, or things that are hyper local that honestly are not covered by media. Now, the big con of that is you're getting it through a filter. So like if I want to, I mean, I'm fascinated by it. Maybe you experience this, Lauri, too, as a school board member, but we'll have this intense 3 hour meeting where massive decisions are being made with millions of dollars at stake. And then it's like there's not a single person that ever knows about it. So that's when I'll be kind of like on Twitter and be like, is anybody talking about this? Should I say something about this? And when other things are happening in other local communities, I'll use that as a source. But again, the big con is who knows what's factual there. You're getting everything through the lens of someone who's not a journalist.
Yeah, I'm glad I unmuted. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the instant nature of it because but that's where I was going, both as a pro and a con. When you had to, when decision makers were able to implement decisions and let them play out, and you might not know about it until you read a Sunday paper or and maybe even later. It's just, I think it allowed everybody like a cooling off period to be less reactive. And I think that it is both a pro and a con. And I think as communicators and decision makers, that's just something for us to navigate and try to have influence over people's reactionary nature and trying to let the outcomes play out. And I don't know how we always navigate that, and I think sometimes we don't navigate it well at all.
I was just gonna acknowledge everything that you guys have said already. I feel like when it's good, it's very, very good, and when it's bad, it's horrid. And by that, I mean it can allow us access to information and it can provide information and coordinate people and help coordinate actions and opinions. However, it can also amplify the very worst, and with misinformation, and the lack of control of the algorithm in particular platforms, you're not really sure if it really is instantaneous or where the information's coming from or why you're seeing it. So I think those are kind of pluses and minuses, in my opinion. I don't love social media, I'm not gonna lie, but it's here, so.
To expand on it, Lauri, too, I think it's created a new norm that has fundamentally changed or hurt journalism. This idea that you see people posting things all the time. I heard this. I don't know if it's true, but what the heck? I'll put it out there anyways.
Yeah.
We can all talk about it. Whereas a newspaper reporter, I'm looking right at you, David Haynes, like you would
Yeah.
like that would never happen. Like, hey, there's a rumor going around. Don't know if it's true, but we're going to publish it.
Right. No check and double check, triple check.
I would say that something that, like what you've all said, is so like instant. And, I could hop on my phone right now and read us something like from BBC. Now, the thing for me is, during like my undergrad studies, I dabbled a lot in like international law, international affairs. So I see a lot of that more than I see the stuff at home. So I kind of have to dig around for that because the algorithm has figured me out. Um, but I will say it gets as someone so I was born in like 97, so I'm not old, but I'm not like part of the youth, as some people would say. So something that I've learned is like it gets super overstimulating when, your friends are sending you something. Or sometimes my grandma will send me something and be like, I want your opinion on this political scientist. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that right now, grandma. So it gets really overstimulating, but also at the same time, you just have like, the world of news at your fingertips.
I'd like to push a little bit on something in the chat there under B. It says, do you think social media has helped with increased interest and engagement? And I think it has, and this is where I want to push a little bit towards Ruby and Gabe and some of the next generation. I think it has increased engagement. My fear and what I anecdotally see happening is that I'm concerned that our younger generations don't always translate that social media engagement into engagement with their elected officials or engagement with voting. And that I think is something to work on. And I'm curious if you guys want to push back and tell me I'm wrong or that you see something different.
No, Ben, I think you're right. I think that a lot of people, um, our ages, younger, things like that, they're more engaged in like, enjoying their freedom of speech. And please enjoy it, post to your heart's desire. But at the same time, I mean, if we ran the numbers, do we really think that, the newly, in, aged out 18-year-olds are, registered to vote? I don't think so. So I think that they need to, get more engaged with their local officials or even just register to vote. And I mean, we can't force them to vote, of course, but even if it just is in the back of their mind, being like, yeah, I can vote and, you know, whatever elections are upon us, like the midterm. Um, yeah, I think that there needs to be an increase of, it has to be a 50-50. Like you can engage and like share and post and do all those things, but can you also get a little, engaged like personally, like register to vote or get to know your local officials, things like that?
I think, to Ben's point, I think you can see that in the governor's Democratic primary election results for governor. One of the candidates, Francesca Hong, primarily ran a campaign through social media, and that's how her campaign worked. The other major candidate, David Crowley, focused a lot more on TV ads and endorsements from other elected officials. And David Crowley ended up winning. So I do think that a high amount of social media presence and engagement doesn't always translate into people voting for that candidate and the results that the social media candidate wanted, even though it's the most practical way to engage people of a younger audience or demographic.
It's really interesting
Right.
stuff. I'll just take a second here and mention a couple things from the chat. I want to acknowledge everyone because we really want you to participate. So on an earlier topic, Deb Martin shared that she listens to NPR, WPR, the Herald for Oshkosh News, and then some from the Oshkosh Northwestern in terms of where she gets her news. Mike said, I also think it nationalizes local political conversations, which is often harmful, which Lauri, I think, seconded. And then Ali wrote, for what it's worth, I think the breakage between youth engagement, interest, and actually voting is rooted in a distrust of the government in the very real ways they see regular people's interests being deprioritized, which got a couple seconds there. And Ali is on one of our other action teams, so thanks for chiming in, Ali. Okay. Um, Let's see. So now we have a question too. Can people register to vote online now? It used to only be in person. So that's a relevant question for this, getting at how it works. And Lori says with the right credentials, it is possible. Excellent. Does anybody want to say anything else about that particular thing before I move on to Ali's other point in the chat? Okay, he says two issues that have animated young people the most in the past decade are climate change and gun violence, both of which are issues where special interests have made it really hard to get things done. Hard not to feel discouraged. That seems like an important point too. Okay, anybody on the panel want to say anything more about those topics or one of the other sub point from the main question there before we move on?
I would just say, oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, Laura, you go. I said enough.
I was just going to respond to the two issues that have animated young people comment, gun violence and also climate change. I think it's a good segue into one of the other questions that you had about how things could change to either increase engagement or allow, I think a lot of younger people feel really disengaged because it appears that what they care about doesn't matter. And I think one of the biggest changes that has happened was Citizens United and the fact that unlimited amounts of money are now pouring into these races that really do have an impact. And they are often related to those special interest groups as opposed to supporting what the individual would like to see in their own communities. So I just wanted to comment about that. I agree.
What I was going to say, Laura, I mean, it's not too far away, but I think it's more than young people. It's something we've talked a lot about at WISACT, and I think it's something that exists on the right and the left. When you get to the point where you have populations of people that it goes beyond feeling like their voices aren't being listened. It starts listened to. It gets to the point where they feel they're not allowed to have a voice. And I do think that's why we've seen this rise in populist movements on the right and the left that are this common rejection of a political status quo that folks don't think is working. And I appreciate that you tie it to some specific court decisions, but I think I think it's greater than that. I think it's something that crosses partisan lines.
All right, excellent discussion. I'm going to keep us rolling. Here's the next question with a couple related sub questions. And I apologize for the blocks of questions, but I was putting together related questions into that I think hopefully makes sense going together. So this one is various studies have shown that engaging in political discussions online primarily reinforces previously held beliefs rather than resulting in constructive dialogue. What does the panel suggest are effective practices for engaging in political discussion online, or is civil dialogue only possible to achieve in person? Who wants to take that one?
I'll start. I'm not sure that it is possible to have civil political discourse online. I mean, I'll back that up. In written comments and back and forth like that, I don't know that you're influencing anybody's decisions. I think what we're doing here today, I would separate out from that. That being said, I think the way to try and approach it, if you're going to, and I tell people this the same for in-person discussions, is to try and depoliticize it and don't talk about partisan politics, but instead talk about impacts. We can talk about how something impacted, your neighbor's inability to afford their prescriptions, and then tie it to a policy rather than Republicans bad, Democrats bad, other party good. And I think that's the way to start to try to have those conversations. That being said, I don't know if we can successfully in the comments section or in Twitter influence and have civil discourse.
I can tell you, Paul, my strategy is again, I'm currently serving as the president of the school board, and so right, everybody dislikes me, but that's I guess what you sign up for, right? But my strategy when you're communicating online is they call it the Cuban Missile Crisis strategy, which is where when JFK and I believe Khrushchev were communicating, JFK decided he's only going to respond to what he thinks are the reasonable questions, the reasonable asks, and just kind of put the more unreasonable stuff that's not meant to be constructive on the back burner. So when I'm communicating with folks on Facebook, I try to answer every single question, always assume positive intent. Does it work? I'd say over the years, there's probably been 5 or 6 people that despise me that stopped despising me. That's a very low success rate. So I think that supports Ben's statement that maybe civil dialogue isn't very possible on at least that's particular social media trend or social media platform. I think it's really hard. I think it's a really, really hard thing to do, but I do think that it's up to us, at least as individuals, we can all at least try. And I do think folks can find that disarming if they're coming at you hard and you're just saying, okay, you're allowed to have your opinion.
I would add to that. I agree with everything that's been said so far. I also think if you come at it with facts, just facts, and try to be as unbiased or unsubjective as you can, that can help diffuse. Um, However, short of having moderated discussions or places where these discussions can happen online, where there are stated guidelines that are enforced, it's very difficult to have good conversations like that online right now. But I have seen some positive movement with things like what Mike is talking about. And I have a really good friend who basically gets online and talks primarily about education information. And when something is posted that is inaccurate, she posts the corrected factual version, just so you know. And I have also seen some movement where people are more likely to be engaged in a positive manner going forward, but not a lot.
That's great. One quick interjection that both your comments there, Mike and Laurie, made me think of something we heard in Belfast. You may have, if you've been at other meetings or been paying attention to our newsletters, you know that some of us had the privilege of going to Belfast, Northern Ireland for a learning trip. And the main facilitator, Gary Mason, who's basically given us lessons coming out of violent conflict about how we can try to have civil discussions in politics. His response is, what he tries to do is say, well, you may well be right, even if he completely disagrees with it. You may well be right, but what's your alternative? Let's talk about it. That kind of attitude, disarming, but saying let's get into it. What would you suggest then? I just thought I'd throw that out there. Other people have thoughts on this particular question. All right, we're moving on then to number 5, which there's a lot of words here. I'm going to warn you. Number 5 is, as the Boomer and Gen X voter blocks simultaneously approach their mortality cliffs. Yikes! I'm in one of those blocks. And carry the weight of election outcomes, they face unique issues with sense making and fact finding.
Who wrote that question?
I do not know. It wasn't me. What are some strategies to improve engagement, sidestep spin, and weigh alternatives outside of echo chambers? And then the second related question there is, do you think the different generations, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z use social media differently when it comes to news and their political intake? And we've touched on that a little bit. So panelists, feel free to take any part of that. And again, others that are participating with us, feel free to jump in.
At least with my news intake that I try to do on YouTube and other social media, is I do watch traditional news. I try to get traditional news from very different um, outlets or sides of the political spectrum. So like I've watched MSNBC and then I watch Fox and I compare and contrast how they're different. I think that how you can improve strategies and spin and weigh alternatives outside of echo chambers is just watch news that you politically disagree with. I consider myself to be pretty much on the left side of the political spectrum. I work for a Democratic elected official, so I try to watch news that I might disagree with. And I do think that different generations use social media differently. Um, at least my parents and my grandparents, they use Facebook a lot more than I do. And I think a lot of the political dialogue on Facebook is actually pretty bad. It's like Twitter in that way. And I think they use it differently, and I think people are willing to engage with it in different ways, um, and stuff like that. So
I agree with you, Gabe. I think it's really important for people to intake different news outlets or maybe ask for recommendations from friends and be like, what do you listen to? What do you like to read for a newsletter? Things like that. Um, I also agree that the different generations 100% use social media way differently. So my mom isn't on social media. My dad kind of is, so he'll sometimes pull up stuff every once in a while and be like, hey, watch this. And I'll be like, Dad, you understand this is like AI, right? Like this isn't real. Like this is just a good clickbait. Um, I know that a question somewhere down the way is something about, politics and all like the integration of AI, possibly something like that somewhere down the line. But um, yeah, I agree that Facebook has now been used as just, I don't want to call it an endless echo chamber, but it kind of is when it's like your older relatives like are posting about XYZ, and sometimes I just need to log off of Facebook sometimes and I just need to take a break. But I do think it's really important for people to seek out other news outlets or ask for recommendations from, trusted friends and family when it comes to, getting a better idea of, everyone's point of view when it comes to either, state politics, federal politics, local politics, things like that.
I just wanted to say this is that question that I was kind of referring to in the beginning. I am of that age group where I still remember what it was like when we all watched the same 4 or 5 TV channels and we all watched the same commercials. And I think, their different generations are receiving their information differently and also get into ruts, I think, or comfortable, less flexible. So, and then if they're consuming in a certain way, the fairness doctrine was something that ended. And so if you're watching TV news, they no longer have to present both sides of the story anymore in a balanced way. So I've watched a lot of the older generation really be siloed and be consuming their information from one place. So how do we help them to do exactly what you're talking about, and which I also subscribe to? I seek out other opinions in other places. How do we help our older generations navigate this when they didn't come up through the whole social media thing? And to your point, Ruby, they may not even realize that some of the things they're watching were AI generated. Um, so I would throw that back to the group.
I love that question, actually. I think something that older generations could take away from, younger generations and build that, mutual understanding of intake of politics would be, like we kind of suggested, like, would you, I mean, it depends on how set in this person's ways that they are. So, if you can encourage them to, watch other news outlets or, um, listen to a podcast, or even if you just casually, my mom's done this a few times at her mom's house. She'll like leave like other different like magazines about when we stop on by. So then it's like, my grandma's like, oh, what's this? So then maybe she'll open it and, read a different, point of view versus, what she's typically used to. I think it's like we shouldn't like shove it onto them, but a gentle, you know, push in a different direction.
Is and this is something, Paul, that we talked about in June. We had a trip to Atlanta with different teams from around the country. I mean, is the fundamental problem that we don't want, as us, so many individuals don't want to hear something that contradicts our priors? That seems like such a tough nut to crack. Like I just think, and one of my best friends, he's always sending me these articles from this outlet that's clearly Russian propaganda, but that's what he likes. And he believes it, and that's great. Like I tell him, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that this is Russian propaganda. And he's like, oh no, no, this guy's good. But that's what he wants. And then, we start at the beginning. What do we consume? Why do I like CNN? I like Wolf Blitzer. I do like Wolf Blitzer, but I don't know. And that seems like such a harder question to answer. Because we can all say that, yeah, we want people to get more sources, but what if people don't want that?
I would throw out there too that just another consideration and where I'm kind of watching this happen is in independent and assisted living environments. 9 times out of 10, you walk in there and what's on the TV is one particular news station and it's broadcast throughout the whole place. So is there something there as well? But to your point, Mike, is that what they want to consume? But at the same time, it's reinforcing.
Okay, while we think about that bigger nut to crack, I'm just going to read a couple interesting comments from the chat here. One from Ann Kunkel Jones, who says, my experience over the past 15 years was being in the middle of my in-laws, pre-boomers, and my son, born 1997. It was not a great place to live, as my in-laws kept telling my son they were voting for his future, but never asking him what he thought about it, and saw them voting against his future. And then Alex Weissenfels said, I find starting from people's concerns about impact and outcomes, like what Ben described earlier, reliably helps people get comfortable with considering other concerns and exploring constructive approaches. Facts and sources don't enter the picture until we understand the stakes and start figuring out how to make the situation better. And I think that lines up a little bit with what Mike was just saying too, that maybe it's not so much about the facts, it's what people like. But again, if we want to take a constructive tack, focus on what people are feeling and actually seeing around them and experiencing, and then move on to talking about what you might think or do about that. Do others want to weigh in on anything from this set of questions here?
I just would expand on your idea of what people's experience is. I think that's also something to develop empathy, also, as well as what is your experience. Your context will definitely kind of rule the day.
Yeah, and we don't want to take this Dolly thing too far, but I was reading quite a bit about Dolly, and that word empathy came up a lot. That she was clearly a very empathetic person. I'm going to put this one in the next question in the chat. It's related, but it might cause us to hit upon new topics given the way it's worded. So if you had one piece of advice you would give to someone if they're using social media platforms to learn more about local, state, national news, what would it be? What advice would you give someone about how to do that more constructively, I guess? And if we've already covered that enough, we can move on. But anybody have anything else to say about that topic?
I'd say either don't or consider other areas, make sure you have a variety of platforms, different viewpoints.
Yeah, make your follows a little bit confusing, and different partisans ideology, try to confuse the algorithm. That seems silly, but seriously.
I think this is a piece of advice I give when people ask. They have to be ready to receive this. But if people ask, like, how can I do this on social media, or how can I change so I seek out different information? I tell people when they're ready to receive that, try and find information that disputes what you believe instead of trying to find what proves what you believe, or confirmation bias. But well, some people are ready to receive that. And when they ask, like that simple piece of advice, like just go try and prove yourself wrong, can be really like just refreshing. And I've gotten feedback from people like did it and said, wow, I had no idea. That was great.
All right. We're getting short on time and have a couple questions left, though, and I think we can get through them. This one's a little different, but I think you'll see that it's on a topic that has been covered ravenously in social media. So this is what somebody submitted. With Mitch McConnell being missing in action since June, and so many politicians in their 80s, including the president, people have been left to wonder if there's been enough transparency about their ability to perform their jobs. This has led to increased online speculation about their health. And you can see the questions there. Do you think elected officials should be more transparent so that the people they serve are not left to speculate? Additionally, should there be term limits and a maximum age limit to hold office? Or should there be competency requirements for all office holders, regardless of age?
I have been waiting for this question. I'm not gonna lie. So I wrote a paper during my undergrad. It was like one of my first like political science classes. Dr. Amber Lizvardi put us to task and was like, guys, I need you to write some sort of like legislation or a bill, just like a draft. Mine was about how there needs to be age and age limits for elected officials. And, I don't absolutely respect my elders, but there's a time and a place and a manner where we need to be like, it has been wonderful watching you, grow as a politician, serve this country, but it's time to go. But I think that there does need to be some sort of chain of communication from, you know, Mitch McConnell or other older people holding seats that, the term limits are either you die in office or you retire. I think that there does need to be some transparency regarding their health and well-being so that we're not all sitting here, twiddling our thumbs up, you know, twiddling our thumbs and trying to update the news every 5 seconds to know if, Mitch McConnell is still with us or if the president is still with us. And I think that there does need to be a form of transparency and communication and term limits and age limits when it comes to either being elected or getting reelected.
I would also answer yes and yes, and I would add the Supreme Court to this as well.
That's a great one.
I'll go next. I I do think that elected officials should be extremely transparent about their health and about their performance on the job. They're getting paid. They have a position. It's a job that they have, and no other person in any other job could take months off from a job and still perform in it in a in a satisfactory way. We don't have paid family leave in the United States. So I do think elected officials should be extremely transparent about their health. And if they're not, they should be asked to come back to office. And if they can't, they should vacate their spot and let someone else be elected to it. It Part B though, I do think that there is a difference between age and vitality of the individual in question. There is certain elected officials that are older, but they're all there mentally. An example is Bernie Sanders. He's in his 80s, but he can still function and do his job effectively. And then there's other elected officials in their 80s that cannot. So I actually do think that competency tests are actually an interesting point that could be explored because I think that you need to be all there and you need to be receptive toward in the world around you because we live in an ever-changing world and older people tend to be slower to adapt to said changes, if that makes sense.
So I'm probably the outlier on this one. I always think about, what qualifies one to be an elected official. It's one more vote than the other person. That's ultimately how it works, right? In a democracy and self-government. So I'm always a little skeptical or worried when we start talking about we're going to have competency tests or very specific rules beyond, your basic constitutional requirements of age and residency, dictating who's allowed and who's not allowed to be an elected official. Because I could see that going in many different directions and be prone to weaponization. And I think we've seen a slippery slope in that regard, in Wisconsin and elsewhere, where we're attempting to find ways to choose our leaders beyond just honest voting. I mean, a lot of what WIS Act is talking about is this concern that we're trying to some folks are trying to disenfranchise voters, or concern about structural problems that are going to disenfranchise the will of the people. Ultimately, we're talking about threats to self-government. So, we talk about a competency test? Who gets to decide what that is? Is it going to be a majority in Congress who says, gets to make those rules? How's that going to go? And then when the majority switches, is that going to be a new group? I don't know. And maybe I'm throwing out red herrings here, but that does worry me. I mean, I think ultimately it's up to elected officials to know, and the people around them, to understand when their time should be up, when they need to step down. So I'm definitely more amenable to the idea of term limits. I think that is something that's logical and has been shown to work elsewhere, or to be compatible with our democracy. But I worry a bit.
In the vein of time being up, it's almost up. And so I want to put a final question in here. There's a lot of good discussion or comments in the chat, and I think I'd encourage you to read them for yourself. There's not enough time to go through all of them, but I appreciate everyone weighing in. Maybe one or two people could succinctly take a crack at this one, which is, what is something you want Wisconsinites to know about our upcoming midterm elections?
Elections are run by local officials, not the federal government, and overwhelmingly, your local officials will work very hard to ensure that your votes are counted and counted properly, and do not let anybody scare you off of not voting because of concerns you've heard.
I agree with that. And I would add my more negative way of phrasing exactly the same thing, that the level of conspiracy and competence across different levels of government and secrecy that would have to occur to commit widespread voter fraud to the point of throwing an election is beyond anything I've ever witnessed in terms of competency in state or local government. And I'm a huge state and local government guy. It's just not plausible.
Well, on that note, I want to say thank you very much to the panelists and to everyone who came and participated here. Hopefully you got something positive out of this. If you are not yet signed up as a WIS-ACT member, which essentially just means you believe in working towards the goals that you'll find at the link, please sign up. That'll get you the newsletter and you'll get all the announcements about these monthly meetings. So we hope to see you again, and hope you have a great day here in Wisconsin. Thanks, everybody. Zoom channel, same Zoom place, so just hang around for a little bit longer.